Absolutely. All right. Well, thank you everybody for coming tonight, and maybe some more people will pop in as I carry on. So, but it's great and appreciate everybody's joining tonight, the night before Thanksgiving, where you're getting your turkey ready and all that, but you're here to listen to this. So, um, here we go. So, how do you know? A few main things just to get started. Of course, these are order Lepidoptera, which is butterflies and moths, and Lepido means scales, and Pteron means wings, and we know that these insects have their wings covered with tiny scales, which are actually modified flattened hairs. The pigmented scales give.
Fred,
Yeah,
are you, I don't think you're sharing yet.
I'm not.
No.
Okay, hold on. My bad. All right, let me pull this back up. Okay. One second here. Now?
Yep, we're good.
All right, great. Sorry, folks.
You just need to start the show and you'll be good. Yep.
Okay. So, as I was saying, the tiny scales are modified. There's different shapes to the scales too. And we're going to see that with moths, they have larger and heavier scales that makes them also look bigger and fuzzier. Pigmented scales give colors, and scales can have diverse shapes and even three-dimensional structure that can refract light. So the morpho butterflies, those gorgeous blue butterflies from South America, have refractory properties. They're three-dimensional, so they bend light. And when you look at a blue morpho, what you're seeing is really the refracted light, the blue wavelength, not pigment. And that's what's confusing. People think it's blue pigment, and yeah, oh, they're dazzling. Let me tell you what, when you see those flying around in the jungle, they blow you away. It looks like this big neon blue ball flying in front of you. But that's refractory because of their three-dimensional scales. There's other groups that have some of this too, but the morphos are like spectacular. So, of course, insects are typical insects. They have, the two pairs of wings and 6 legs, antennas, and body divided in 3 sections: head, thorax, abdomen. And a few species of moths, the females have evolved to become wingless even. And of course, with the wings, they have upper and lower membranes supported by a system of hollow veins. And each family has distinctive vein patterns from which they may be identified. And that's one of the things, if you're very serious collector and you're getting to some of these difficult groups, you have to learn about the veination, how to distinguish them by the veins in the wings, because those are rules that hold true. Each family has a very distinctive vein pattern. Okay, for the average collector or person, you won't see that so much. So our Lepidoptera divided in 2 main groups: Heterocera and Rhophalocera. Suborder Rhophalocera are the butterflies. Rhophalos means club and cera means horn, and we know that butterflies have clubbed antennas. And then the Heterocera are the moths, which are the remainder of all Lepidoptera, and by far a lot more species of moths, a whole lot more. And hetero means different or varied, and cera means horns. And why are they varied and different is because we know that while most butterflies have long, thin, slender, too fast. While most have the club-shaped antennas or clubs at the tips of the antennas, and they're long and thin, moths have comb-like, feathery antenna, often with edge. Other groups have filamentous or wire-like, but they're unclubbed. So when we look at those, we can see in this, these are some images I took. This one on the right-hand side is from the Peterson Field Guide. So you can see the bipectinate, that's the typical feather appearance. There's the pectinate and filiform. Filiform are wire-like. And from this old moth book, this was the original moth book printed in 1903, and still a very good, has beautiful plates in it. I have an original printing of this book, so I wanted to show from there the same drawings here of the different structures and how moth antenna can appear. So how else are they different? Resting wing posture. So moths rest with their wings open or folded down, generally speaking, and butterflies frequently close their wings upward when they're perched, although though they will occasionally bask or sunbake with the wings spread open for short periods. And you can see that a lot with a whole lot of kinds of butterflies that do that with the wings wide open. But moths will rest, especially at lights when you see them, then they're resting. And this Peterson Field Guide book illustrates on the front cover resting wing positions. So you can see all the different moth types here in this picture. And this is how you find them when they come to lights. Some have the wings folded down, some are just sort of angled downwards, some are curled under, and various types of wing positions, okay? So the new Peterson Field Guide, for those of you that don't have this book, all the plates touch showing the wings in resting position, which is good to some extent because when you see them, if you're just observing them, that's how you're going to observe them. So the book is good that way. But a lot of times, as you might realize, with the wings down, you can't see the underwings. You're only seeing the top wings mostly. So then you won't know what the underwings look like. But that's the way the new Peterson Field Guide has been made. So more about wing structures. This is the key thing now. Why are they different? Okay. Moths have, or most moths have, what's called a frenulum, a hook-like structure, which is a wing coupling device, and it keeps the hind wing to the forewing and ensures that the wings travel together during flight. And this little filament arises from the hind wing and couples up with the barbs on the forewing. Some moths have what's called it's a lobe-like structure on the forewing called a jugum, and it does the same thing, helps couple the hind wing to the forewing. So the frenulum, you're only going to really be able to see it if you have the moth in your hands and looking at it. Butterflies do not have this. There's your big difference right there on the wings. Here's what it looks like. So if you look close, you guys see my cursor moving. Right here is the frenulum, that's little hook. Do you see that? It's at the base of the wing, right up near the thorax of the insect. It's like a little hook here. So that'll hook into the forewing. So that's the frenulum. And then down here is the jugum. And you can see that that's like a little lobe, but that's on the forewing actually, isn't it? So it's some moths have the jugum. Most of them are going to have the frenulum. Okay. Again, something you need to have it up in your hand close to look at it to see that. So life cycles then, as most people know here, that complete metamorphosis from ova to larvae and then pupa or a chrysalid, from which emerge the imago, the winged adult. Life cycle can take anywhere between a few weeks to more than a year, depending on the species. An exception, and there's maybe some others too, but this one is the longest living, is the swift moth, which is in the Hippialid family in Australia. 4 years as a larvae. which is phenomenal when you think about it. Now, we think of cicadas, and then of course the periodic cicadas are 17 years underground, incredible for an insect, but most are never even near this. And certainly with the Lepidoptera, to have one that takes 4 years is very amazing. They're big moths too. They're big green and very impressive looking beasts. Pupation, overwintering can be done as an egg, a hibernacula, which is a little caterpillar rolled up in a leaf, a pupa, or cocoon. So we know that most butterflies form an exposed pupa or chrysalis, which hangs from the vegetation. Butterfly larvae make crude cocoons in which they pupate. So there's sometimes that can be confusing if you find these, if you know how to look for them. The Parnassius butterfly larvae make a flimsy cocoon in which they pupate near the ground surface in the debris in the leaf litter. And then many moths spin a cocoon made of silk and metamorphose inside into a pupa. Many other groups, including the Sphingidae, the sphinx moths, bury themselves and form a pupa which lies slightly underground. It wouldn't surprise me. I think a lot of people know if you've been planting, digging in your garden, and you superficially move the soil, you might pull up some pupae. Maybe not a big sphinx moth, but some smaller ones, which also do the same thing. I find them periodically when I'm out in the yard digging, little pupa, some certain moths that do the same thing. So not all moths make a cocoon. Basic appearance. And here's where we have the typical stereotype. Moths tend to have stout and hairy or furry looking bodies and have larger scales on their wings, make them to look more dense and fluffy, maybe due to the need for moths to conserve heat during the cooler nights or to confound echolocation by bats. And of course, butterflies, slender and smoother abdomens and have fine scales able to absorb the sunlight. Butterflies at high altitudes often have hairy bodies, hirsute. They do. So not all butterflies are smooth like that. If you've ever been up in high altitude areas and seen them, you'll know what I mean. Coloration is often thought of as drabber in nocturnal moths, but this generalization is often erroneous because there's some spectacular moths with phenomenal coloring. Activity times. Most moths are nocturnal or crepuscular, which means they fly at dusk, while most butterflies are diurnal, which means flying during the day. Exceptions, the Uranidae family or sunset moths, a few species such as the male European/North American gypsy moths, because they're found in both continents, right? They fly during both day and night in search of females, which are actually wingless. And the other exception is the owl butterflies, and they're great big ones, the Brazolidae family, and some Amethusidae family. These are tropical families of butterflies, and they're mostly crepuscular. Here's some examples of Uranidae. They're stunning moths. Urania ripheus from Madagascar and Urania leila from South America. When you see these guys flying around, they're often large numbers of groups and stunning colors. I have video footage of these when I was in Bolivia, and they're just, 7 of them at a time in a little puddle group, and their wings are slowly moving up and down while they're fully extended. So you see all the colors in them. And you look at these, say, well, they look like swallowtails. Yeah, they do look like swallowtails, definitely. And they even have striping like swallowtails. Whoops, I went too fast. The ones from Madagascar, they're called the sunset moths here, particularly because of these phenomenal colors. Okay, so now are the owl butterflies from South America. These fly at dusk, and they come out at dusk, and at first they're just lightly fluttering around close to the ground, And they're real hard to see at dusk. That's their advantage. They fly at dusk so the predators can't catch them. Okay. And once they get cranked up and they start chasing each other around, they are like jets. I mean, they are fast and they're very hard to catch when they're really booking. Because if you look at them, they have heavy bodies, fuzzy, heavy bodies, and they're muscular so that they can really get some speed behind them once they get moving. And the owl eyes is another form of defense on the underside. The one in the lower left corner shows the owl eyes. It's the upside down. These box that you see are going to have the owl eyes. Every one of these has that. And I only put one upside down to show you. And what they do is they flash open those wings. If they're perched with the wings, because they flap them open if a predator was to try to attack them, and it will scare away most any predator, because owls are at the top of the food chain, basically in the jungle. That's a big bird that attacks and eats whatever it feels like it. So again, include camouflage, toxic defenses such as being distasteful or harmful, mimicking species that are distasteful or harmful. So both butterflies and moths can do this, okay? Crypsis, being able to hide. Both larvae or adults having camouflage, coloration, or protections, allowing them to blend into their surroundings. Plants impart alkaloid chemicals into the larvae during feeding, which can stay into the adult cycle. And examples of these are the Danaids, which are the monarch butterflies are in the Danaidae group, and there's a lot more in the tropics. Heliconidae, which are the bow tie butterflies, and Arctidae moths. These have bright warning colors also. When they're toxic like that, they usually have bright warning colors to indicate their toxicity to predators, so they get left alone. A few of flashy colors. Now, these are Arctid moths from right here in Maryland. I've collected these over the years. There's a lot of different ones. I didn't put the great big ones. I have some that are over 1.5 inches wingspan that are, they look just like this on the top wing, gold and black, but the hind wings are bright red. I put the little ones, these are the small ones called apatensis, but these are the like the Virgo tiger moths, look closer to this red one down here in the lower left. Feeding, again, we know the proboscis, the coiled up that extends out and sucks up nectar. But besides nectar, rotten fruits, mud with minerals in, and even feces may attract some groups. Urine, all those things. Believe it or not, butterflies aren't as glamorous as you think they are, and neither are moths, because they'll all come to this sort of thing. So, exceptions. The large silk moths, the Saturnids, live off of stored body fat during their adult life. They don't feed at all. They don't even have mouth parts. So they just live for a short time to mate, and that's that. They don't have to eat. Organs on the feet can taste certain food substances with greater sensitivity than even the human tongue. So now we're going to look at species that are easy to misidentify, and there's plenty of them. So here's a family called the Zyganidae, the royal burnet moths. And if you look at these antennae, these are butterfly antennae in anybody's book. However, these are moths. They have clubbed antennae and they have very flashy colors, and they're diurnal. So you can find these in the European meadows and hillside scrublands. I've collected them in Greece. They're found throughout Europe. We have some here in North America as well. But the European ones are really brightly colored and very pretty. But those clubbed antennas will fool you. Forester moths. These are from here in Maryland, and these are the Agaristinae subfamily, and you can see they're very pretty, and they have antennas that look much like butterfly antennas. They have flashy colors. So these are often misidentified, and they fly during the day on leaves, and the wings are open, So it can be very confusing. Um, these are some of our pretty little things. There's some other species too, and they're very pretty. You'll see them in the forest flying in the daytime. The first time I saw these, I went chasing after one thinking I had a butterfly that I'd never seen before, and I had to get it. Not that I was disappointed or anything, because it's a pretty little moth also, but I thought I had a butterfly there. So, and this is also when I was learning too. Unusual moths. Here's the Tenuchidae family. They're diurnal, although you can see they have the bipectinate antennas, so there's not a lot of confusion there. The one on the far left here has clubbed antennas, it's a noctuid with clubbed antennas, which is really weird, the insect to say the least. The tenuchids you find during the day on flowers and milkweeds and meadows. They're not uncommon, but they're not very attractive. These drabby looking brown things. More diurnal moths. Now here we have the buck moths, these black and white ones. They're very pretty. These are large. They're up to about 2 inches in length. You're looking at females here, so they're a little bigger. Whoops. And they're in the Saturnidae, the silk moth family. There's outbreaks of these where you have them by the dozens flying around trees and stuff. I mean, they can be very abundant. Although lately I haven't heard of any outbreaks of them. In the past, I heard of outbreaks where they were just everywhere. You don't always see them so much anymore, but it depends if you're in the right place at the right time. More diurnal moths. Now these are from Ecuador. Geometridae family. It's another big family. We have a lot of geometrids here in Maryland and in the North America, but they're nighttime flyers, nocturnal mostly, always. These are out during the day. Look at this handsome specimen. This one here, it was amazing. When I caught it, I was sure it was a butterfly until I looked real close. Then I realized it was a geometrid moth. And the ones down here also. And they mimic butterflies that are in the rhyodinid family, which are the metal marks. The tropics, the metal marks are phenomenal in South and Central America. And I'll show you a few, but if you want to just see rhyodinids, I've been talking to you about them because they are just unbelievably beautiful colors. And these moths are mimicking certain ones in that group, to say the least, because many other rhyodinids are metallic colors, metallic blue and green, and just unbelievable colors. Anyway, these are moths. And here now, let's see if you guys can figure this one out. Okay, whoops. Well, I've said it already. Moth is this one, butterfly is this one. So we have an Atrophanura butterfly, which are a group of butterflies that you find in Southeast Asia. And this moth looks very much like it. The antenna, you can see the antenna will give it away, but look at the colors and look at the wing shapes and all, they're identical practically, okay? And then on this side, here's a moth right here. These are from Korea. And these are, this white moth, I don't know the name of it offhand, is a superficial mimic of the Parnassus glacialis and Cericinus montellus. These are papilionid butterflies. And I should just mention that you're looking at specimens. All of these and these were given to me by a gentleman named Dr. William Anderson, who was very well known in the butterfly circles here in Maryland. He, in the 60s and in the 50s even, and into the 70s, collected in all counties in Maryland. He has all the county and state records for practically everything. It was an amazing amount of work that he put in his lifetime. And then he had been in Korea. He was a MASH doctor and a MASH unit on the DMZ. And after the war and all the shelling had ended, he went out and collected butterflies in areas that had been shelled, and he collected all of these. And then he gave them to me and to Phil. And we're fortunate to have these, you know, and again, from the 50s, how many years later? We're talking 70, 75 years ago, whatever it is. And they're still in perfect condition. That's the nice thing about insects. I have stuff in my collection that's 100 years old. They keep very well if you keep them dry and in proper condition. Nothing will happen to them. Oh, the bow tie butterflies. Now here's something cool. All right, whoops, every time I click it changes, sorry about that. The bow tie butterflies from South and Central America all have this typical wing shape, and there's many species. And that just to know them is, just to figure them out is confusing, because there's a lot of lookalikes in the butterflies. But where's the moth in here? Anybody see the moth? In this group, there's a moth. And it's a diurnal moth, which is more interesting because it flies at the same time as the butterflies. Arctidae subfamily.
Is it on the right column, one up?
Down here, this one?
Yeah.
That's
Is that
it.
the moth?
That's the moth. Okay, and you can see the wire-like antenna and the heavier body. So that's how you can tell that one apart. But look at the colors of the wings. They're like identical, aren't they? Or very similar, right? How does this happen? So this is coevolution, people, and it's an amazing process. We call it Mullerian mimicry complex, where butterflies and moths, or other butterflies for that matter, evolve as a complex, as a group, to look alike and thereby gain protection from predators. Because remember, the Heliconidae I've mentioned before are distasteful. They eat passiflora, which has alkaloids in it. So predators don't usually eat them. And so if groups look alike, they all gain some kind of protection that way. So whenever you have a mimicry complex of unrelated groups that form a large complementarian mimicry. So now we're going to look at Uranidae, another family of moths. Okay, over on the right, Nyctalemon species. These came from Southeast Asia, Thailand, and Malaysia. And this gorgeous one, this butterfly has come from Ecuador, Sematura lunis. That's the only one I ever collected, and I tell you what, it was an amazing catch. I was thrilled, to say the least. If you're a collector like me, you know, these sort of things make your night. They are nocturnal, but they look like butterflies. It's swallowtails, for God's sake. These look just like swallowtails. Now, and they have slender bodies, like you can see. They're a little thicker than butterflies, but they're still slender, and they have wire-like antennas. Over here now, we have Urania alcides. These are moths over here, but look at the butterflies, Papilio-Leglazii. These are swallowtails. And who mimics who? So is this Batesian mimicry, where you have a model and a mimic? Or is it Mullerian mimicry, where you have group mimicry? I think these are more Batesian mimicry, because if I'm not mistaken, the butterflies are palatable, the moths are not. And so the butterfly might mimic the moth to be protected from predators, okay? They're very interesting to see. These are found in Papua New Guinea. So now, what are we looking at? Butterflies or moths, people? Who can tell me?
Looks like butterflies to me.
You're too good.
On the left, the grouping of the three, I think the top one is a moth and the bottom two are butterflies.
Okay. Anybody else want to weigh in? How about these on the right?
Fred, I'll guess butterfly on the top, moth on the bottom.
Okay. They're all butterflies.
Ah,
And they're all rhyodinid in the Rhyodinidae family. Okay. And I put these in on purpose because they could look like moths, for God's sake. But they're butterflies. And if you look real close, you'll see the long, slender antennas are barely clubbed, though. They do have tiny or thickened ends on them. Now, these here are extremely hard to catch. They are fast and they perch upside down. They get under a big leaf, like a big philodendron plant, and they'll go and they'll hide under the leaf, and you can't see them. And if you try to sneak up on them, boom, they're gone. Then you have to try to run down the trail or wherever you are to try to get close to them again and do this. Very pretty. And these eye spots glow. That's what's really cool about these. They actually glow. And there's moths that have these eye spots, the same place, same position, glow like that, same looking eye spots. There's a lot of moths, not two-eyed moths, that have that. So it's easy to be fooled. How about these? Now, these are all moths, Geometrid moths from Southeast Asia. And you can see they wings superficial, they look like butterflies, for God's sake. The antennas, though, if you look at them, you'll see they are bipectinate antennas. Some are wire-like. The colors, like some of these here, that looks like a butterfly to me, you know, but I know better. These geometrids here are large. We're talking the big one down here, it's a good 3-inch wingspan. And the ones on the right, the yellows and all, these are related to these over here. The ones on top are a different group altogether. But I caught these all during the daytime in the jungles when I was traveling in Southeast Asia. And actually these yellow ones and these over here, they come out in the clearings when you get to the top of a mountain and there's just bush where those guys live, and they fly around those bushes during the daytime in the broad sunlight. And you know what's cool? This portion of the wing, the dark ends of the wings, and these here is purple. And when you see that in the sunlight, it blows you away. Purple. And you're like, how is that possible? And you can't see it in the picture, but if I took these and held them out in the sunlight, they would be purple. Okay, I thought now, butterflies. These are what we call the clear wing butterflies for obvious reasons. Long, thin antennas. These hardly have any clubs on them. So if you were just looking at the antennas, you might not be able to be sure. But there's a couple hundred species of these easily. I'm just showing you one little grouping of them that I have here. I have many more, but some of these are real common. But every time you turn your head, there's a different one. And that's what makes it so interesting when you travel and go into these places to look. These also form a Mullerian mimicry complex with. Okay, now diurnal Archidae moths. These are from the Bahamas, the Composia fidelissima. Aren't these beautiful? The colors alone is just like striking. I mean, when you see these flying around, you would swear, hey, there's a cool butterfly, but it's an Arctid moth. Okay, and then on the far right here, we have wasp mimics. And you have to look twice at these because you would swear that was a wasp. And there's many more. I can't even begin to tell you how many I've seen and collected in South America. I just wanted to show a few examples for the sake of the lecture because it could go on for a long time here with showing all this stuff. But yeah, there's a lot of wasp mimics and they're very cool. Here's a few more. These are here in Maryland, the Ciciadae family. And they have, look at the antennas, butterfly-like antennas on these guys, okay? And these very much wasp-like, and they're pests. The black ones, this one's, and this one over here, well, these here are squash vine borers. If you grow zucchinis, they will get into your zucchinis and chew them up. the larvae will destroy them after a little while. Every summer you get zucchinis for a little while, and then the plants get all ratty and everything. That's because these moths get in them. These guys are peach tree borers, so they attack the peaches. And there's many more. The Cecidae family one. There's other ones in this group here in Maryland that look like our paper wasps, you know, with the yellow and black banded abdomens. So anyway, how about these now? Satyridae, the satyrs. We have a lot of satyrs in the North America, but I wanted to show you some of the ones from the tropics, look like moths, for God's sake. And where do they fly? In dark forests, in jungles, low to the ground. Sometimes they're difficult to catch because they're right in the vegetation, and you have to really be careful. You'll rip your nut to pieces trying to get these guys. But they do perch in that moment if you're trying to catch one or take a picture. In any case, here's one. This one has a triangle missing. This is a bird beak. You can always tell the ones when the birds got hold of them, because birds leave a very distinctive tear mark, the beak mark, we call it. So birds see them and want to eat them, but they have those dark colors and they blend into the forest very well. Now,
you'll notice that the chomp out of the wing is right in the middle of the color patch.
yeah,
So the color patches oftentimes are a deflection device, which
good point.
directs the
Thanks.
predator's attention away from the vulnerable body.
Correct. Yeah. So now, butterfly-like moths and moth-like butterflies. Which is it? So the butterfly-like moths, the Casnea. People, look at this. Does that look like a moth? It's got antennas that are speaking butterfly, and all of them in this group. This is South American and Central American. They're very colorful, and they have these crazy antennas that don't look like moths at all. They come out and they fly during the daytime, and they're usually resting in the bushes. And so when you go through a place and you disturb things, they get out and they fly out in front of you, and they will shock you because they're so big. Some of them are big and they're very pretty, and they give you a little startle. So many are brightly colored, and this is one of the rare ones here. This one came from Colombia when I was there a few years back, and it's the only one I've ever seen from there. I have other ones in my collection from other countries that I've been to, but this is super beautiful. Now, moth-like butterflies. So now we'll talk about the skippers. Now, everybody probably is aware of skippers because you've seen a lot of them in your yard, probably little brown guys with folded wings. And there's a whole lot of skippers here in Maryland, and many are hard to tell apart. You have to really look at butterflies for a long time and look at these to be able to distinguish some of the species, because I'm still not 100%. When I look at skippers, I'd have to have it in my hand to see for sure which one it is, because they're hard to tell. When you go to the tropics, though, yes, you have small ones too, but there's some big guys, and you can see from the pictures that they're gorgeous. All this metallic blue colors and all that. They can be over 2 inches in wingspan, some of these big ones, and fast. You can catch them when they perch, but they come to puddle groups too, so you can catch them on the ground sometimes, right? The one on the bottom is one that came to a puddle, and I caught it that way. But note the antennas. Skippers have these hooks on their antennas always, right? And there is actually, in Australia, one of the skippers there has a frenulum on the wing. Okay, so is that a moth or a butterfly then? See, there's a weirdo thing everywhere you turn your head with insects. The family of the skippers, the Hesperidae, actually, their relation in their DNA brings them close to pyralid moths, believe it or not. So they're an unusual group. They're not their DNA is very different than other butterflies. So if you're gonna make a clade, a genetic clade, you would see that all the butterflies fit in one big clade, and the skippers are outside of that. Okay, so that's the end of the show. Oh my goodness, we should look at some more, right? Any questions? I'll be happy to answer from people.
That was great, Fred. Do you wanna unshare and we'll come back and we can do questions?
Yeah, yeah. Okay, so now we can talk a little bit. Anybody want to ask me something? Please go right ahead.
If you have a question for Fred, you can put it in the chat box or just raise your hand and unmute, and we'll recognize you and go ahead and ask him a question. Any questions?
Yep.
I just wanted to say, I guess the key takeaway from this is that, like in so many other areas of life, rules are made to be broken. And most of the general rules that people use to separate butterflies and moths in the field, for the most part, generally hold up. But with any group as diversified and varied as insects, there will always be exceptions to the rules. And it appears that most of the exceptions to the rules in Lepidoptera occur on the moth side. And part of that is because there are such an overwhelming number of moth species when you compare it to butterfly species. In North America alone, there's somewhere close to 12,000 different species of Lepidoptera that have been recorded. And of those 12,000 species, barely 1,000, less than 1,000 are butterflies. So the moths outnumber the butterflies in terms of species 10 to 1. And,
Oh yeah, 10 to 1. That's
and that holds true
Valley.
really almost worldwide.
Yeah, oh, absolutely. There's a whole lot more. In fact, a lot of butterfly collectors, they'll be really into collecting all butterflies, but when it comes to moths, they'll throw their hands up and say, I can't deal with it, you know, because too many. They might like to collect the larger ones, but
And
you know, the little ones, they're saying, no, too much. And
and
new
even
ones are being discovered all the time.
Mhm. And even among butterfly collectors, there's a lot of them that are don't even bother to collect skippers, because for the most part, the majority of skippers are very, very moth-like in their appearance.
Yeah.
Although they're almost strictly diurnal as opposed to moths, which are mostly nocturnal. So again, exceptions to every rule, and most of the exceptions are on the moth side because they're such the overwhelming majority of Lepidoptera.
Thanks,
All
Philip.
right.
I think Dave has his hand up.
Yes.
Yeah.
Dave?
Hi, Fred.
Hi.
My question is going to dovetail exactly off of what Phil was saying.
Okay.
I took a class a few years ago from Jason Dombrowski, and he was talking about the frenulum. And if I remember correctly, you can use that to tell the sex of the moth. I believe that the male has one bristle, females have more than one.
Possibly so. I don't know that holds true with all groups, though.
Yeah.
Did he say that was across the board with any of them that have frenulum? That's going to be the case,
That's what I don't recall.
right? And then what happens when you get to the ones that have a jugum instead?
Yeah. That was a great talk. I really enjoyed it.
Thank you, Dave. Appreciate that.
I
Thank you.
learned a lot more than I thought I might. It was great.
Good. I appreciate you saying so. Thank you. Rebecca, go ahead. Unmute yourself, Rebecca.
Yeah, sorry. It
There
took a
you go.
minute.
okay.
I was just wondering, if there's a theory as to why there are so many more moths than there are butterflies? Like, did one of them evolve before the other one? Is there any evidence?
That's a great question. The fossil record that I've seen I know that there's examples of, believe it or not, of fossil butterflies that I can think of. One was, or there's just a few specimens maybe, that came from the Eocene deposits in Florissant, Colorado, that I'm aware of, where you can see the wings actually. And that's about 35 million, 40 million years ago. And then there's some amber specimens. There's a rhyodinid butterfly. I remember seeing that in amber. Came from the Dominican Republic, and that's 25 million years ago. Insects go way back. Insects go 350, even 400 million. I mean, they go back a long ways. All the precursor ones. Now, the winged ones, winged insects came later, or earlier, not earlier, later, let's say. Maybe 250 million years or so. I'm not an expert on paleo insects. So I'm not sure when that evolutionary step happened and if moths came before butterflies or vice versa. But part of the rule of thumb in evolution is that if there is a niche, something can fill it. So in nature, things will evolve to fill a niche. And I think that with the moths, that niche availability is greater and larger. And so they just went and developed faster and more species like that. Okay. That's kind of an answer for you. And I don't know if that helps or not, but and if anybody knows otherwise, please say so. But I think that's one of the things I can say, is that they just have more availability, so to speak. They feed on a tremendous amount of different plants and multiple plants, which is an advantage. There's moths that can take a whole variety of host plants. And so that helps also, right? So maybe their genes are more mutable so that more species arise. I don't know. But that was a good question.
Thank you.
Yep. Dave, do you know anything about that by any chance?
I guess the first time I found a stigmella, a micromoth, Nepticulidae, I believe it is. I read that they had found fossilized leaf compressions from somewhere in Kansas that dated back to 97 million years ago that had leaf mines of stigmella in them. I guess knowing the species of tree and the type of mine that it was, they figured out it was probably stigmella. So
I see.
Yes, many millions of years ago.
Right. 97. Well, that's Cretaceous
Correct.
era. So, and I will say this, now that you mentioned it, there's a lot of information that can be gleaned from plant fossils.
Right.
Okay. In fact, Conrad Labandiera, who's an acquaintance of mine at the Smithsonian, he's the paleo insect guy. He's the man. I mean, this gentleman has published countless articles on fossil plant interaction, insect plant interactions in the fossil record. And he could speak to this. Most of what I've read of his work entails chewing insects that bore into stems and bore into leaves, like what you're discussing, but his go way back to 300, 400 million years, even some of the oldest ones are that old. But that's what he looks for, is the plant fossils. And then from that, you can see what damage was done to the plants. And then you can determine which mouth parts did that kind of damage. And then you might know what kind of insects were around based on the evolution of the mouth parts. So that's how they do some of that work.
It's fascinating.
Now, yeah, it really is. I don't know enough about it, but that's some of the work that Conrad does, and all based on plant insects. That doesn't help to know if it was a winged insect like what we would think of as a butterfly or a moth. So, but we know that there's a lot of winged insects, and then some of them, in fact, yes, are found way way back in the fossil record, right? I do have, in my collection, I do have fossil insects, not butterflies or moths though, but plenty of fossil insects from Florissant and from other locations that show beautiful wing development. Is, you know, even mine are, I have a couple from the Cretaceous period that are just phenomenal, but they're not butterflies or moths. So anyway, anyone else have a question?
Yeah, any other questions this evening?
I see something in the
Don't
chat.
forget, you can buy your raffle ticket for your if we're talking about fossils, for your dinosaur coprolite. So, you know, fossilized dinosaur poop. So buy those raffle.com. But as we finish up this evening, on this eve of Thanksgiving, I want to give thanks to Fred. And for
welcome.
Fred, I say thank you for sharing your knowledge and expertise with us. We're all smarter for it, and we can all now take this information and have some very interesting conversations around the Thanksgiving table, some that will be will not be as contentious as other kinds of conversations that might be around the Thanksgiving table. So let's talk about moths and butterflies at Thanksgiving. Let's make that a new tradition. And now that we have that.
Well, thanks. And I encourage all people who are listening, you know, to continue to come to the Natural History Society for programs, and also look us up too for the Maryland Entomological Society, because we have our monthly meetings and we have speakers that come in and give great talks of all kinds of insect groups. I know the Lep Club, we think of Lepidoptera mostly, but when it comes to entomology, there's no end to it. So anybody interested in general entomology and all that, give us a look also for the Entomological Society. So any other, before we take off here, I guess? I see. Oh, people are saying thank you.
Yeah,
Well, great.
everybody,
Thanks to everybody too. You're all welcome. I appreciate you guys listening, and everyone have a great Thanksgiving. Eat
have a
lots.
wonderful Thanksgiving. Yeah, stay curious, and we hope to see you very soon, online and in person. Okay. Remember Clubapalooza coming up in January, so let's have a good showing for the Lep Club. All right, everybody, take care.
Absolutely.
Good night, Fred.
Good night, everyone. Thanks again.